All right. Welcome to the Humans in the Loop podcast, our first podcast. I'm Sierra Woods and I'm joined by
Janine Weightman.
Yes, and we're super excited to be here together and just talking about knowledge management, but not just knowledge management. This is a podcast where we're going to be bringing in your questions that we've pulled and canvassed the community, not just KM community, but our own friend circles, people who, when you say knowledge management, sometimes their eyes glaze over and then you help them understand how fun and exciting and life-changing it is. Okay, and then we're also going to talk about the crack, an Irish saying that I just learned by being involved with Knowledge Summit Dublin, which has a slightly different meaning on the other side of the pond. But here I've learned it's come to mean a really good time and fun experiences. And we thought we would just share because this is Humans in the Loop. These are the things that make us human, the things that we do in our lives outside of nerding out on knowledge management. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in to the first part, where one of the things we're going to be talking about is the KM in 10 Tools series. This is part of the Knowledge Summit Dublin newsletter. KM in 10, we're really just pulling the community and asking them for what are your go-to tools. That's hard to say in the same sentence. Go-to tools.
Yeah, we'll get used to it, Sierra. Keep going.
Your go-to tools that you can easily integrate into the flow of work. This is something that you bring to your clients and say, try this. It's super easy and feasible and doable to implement, especially if you're new and kind of intimidated by bringing KM into your daily workflow. And so I've just been asking different folks. They've written articles. They're going to come out in the monthly newsletter. And then we're using that on our podcast as something to inspire conversation, bring in our own perspective. And so this month, Stan Garfield, one of our KM legends, is kicking us off, sharing about the SIKM community and communities writ large. And so I wanted to chat about this with you, Janine, because when I first entered into the field and still now, 3 years in, communities is one of, I would say, the number one things that I hear people talk about a lot. And for me, as I was reading through Stan's article, I was thinking about, the SIKM community. You're guaranteed an answer, like guaranteed, which is pretty amazing. Now, the clients that I work with in their communities, that is like the dream. I don't know, like Janine, have you, in your experience with communities, is that something where you find you're often brought in if it's a healthy community, or is it if it's a community on life support? Like, what's kind of your experience working with communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is, it is a very much a go-to tool for anything to do with knowledge management. And I do think, it's a great construct to support businesses, groups, people with sort of knowledge sharing. And I think my experience has always been right from the kernel of an idea of, we need a community, let's get it started. I'm just going to say, unfortunately, I don't think I've ever been in the position of going to a community that has been on life support or already established. It's been from, this is a community. This is how it can benefit the business, and then try and bring everybody on board and, construct it, in a virtual space, mostly, and then go home at night and cry over a cup of tea as to why nobody's joining and nobody's participating, and then, putting on the brave face and going back and, for another day in the community world and trying and convincing people it's a good idea. And, saying that, that journey has definitely taught me a lot about what makes a successful community and what makes, whether it grows or whether it just dies on the wall.
That's interesting because, well, with the title being Humans in the Loop, like, I'm curious as I think about communities, and I was contemplating this title and we're hearing this phrase everywhere. Like, how do we build communities in a way that keeps the human in the loop when we're thinking about it? And I know in my experience, a community that I worked with, when they initially came to me for help, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to help you build the most thriving, bopping, engaging community, because this one was on life support. Um, and I realized as I was working with them and I would give them sort of tips and tricks and all the evidence informed approaches that it just wasn't working or they weren't able to implement it. And we get back together and for some reason, other things came up. And I realized in that moment that I actually framed the problem incorrectly. I actually started with a solution. And this is like my design thinking mind turning on of what is the actual problem? Yes, the community's on life support, and at first glance, that seemed to be the issue. But actually, the issue where we really needed to start was with the folks that I was helping, was they had a workload issue. And if that wasn't addressed and helped, we weren't going to be able to get to helping introduce certain interventions to make the community more lively. And so I'm just curious, like with you, Janine, have you experienced that? Have you had a similar or different where you start thinking, okay, you're kind of in your KM brain of, okay, communities. We know what we want a good community to look like, and we're going to work to elevate and bring about those patterns.
Mm.
And then it's
Yeah, and then it's,
jokes.
yeah, oh yeah, why is this not working? Yeah. No, I think it's really profound what you said, Sierra, and I think yeah, I think we can tend to go in with the solution far too often. I think, that there's some great examples of communities out there. I mean, all of the stuff that I've read, what Stan's educated all us on with communities, it's been like the bread and butter information for me when I've been thinking about setting up communities, that sort of thing. But you're right, it's got to be the right solution. And whilst we might know it's the right solution and, given all of the right conditions, we could spin that up and make the best community the world's ever seen, it's not up it's not up to us to sort of drive and be that success factor, because it's the people in the community that make the community. And like you say, if you frame the problem wrong, or you're a bit off with that, then it's not going to work, and people aren't going to buy into that. And I think that's probably what my biggest learning with communities is that yes, it's people coming together to, I suppose, collaborate and share knowledge and blah, 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 all of that great stuff. But actually, at the heart of it, I think it's more about identity and belonging. I've noticed that without those factors, communities seem to never get off the ground. And I think when they're kind of enforced, for want of a better word, or like you're made to be in a community because on paper that looks really good and it works, it ticks all of the corporate boxes, like ta-da, we need a community. If those people don't bind together, like mentally, emotionally, socially, then it doesn't seem to go anywhere, or it lasts for a few weeks and then people kind of fizzle out. So it made me think a lot about, well, what is a community? And in the early days, I very much thought, well, yeah, people come together, do the collaboration, they need something to work on. It's not a talking shop. It's not a community of interest, for example. It's got to be worthwhile. And that was too much, like you say, the design thinking, the solutioneering around it. And then when I was looking more to external communities and building sort of brand communities for a client, that's when I really got exposed to, no, it's about the identity. It's the commitment of people to want to work together, and that sort of shared purpose that really forms the foundation. So I think it's more on the psychological side than the technological side that forms a good foundation for a community. So I know, like, off and a question back to you. I mean, well, community, it rolls off our tongue. The amount of times I've talked to people and they've said, what's a community? Like, what is that? What's your view on what a community is?
That is a big question. Yes.
And also, what is a community in this day and age? Because I think there's been a fundamental shift to what it's been like in the past due to a whole bunch of world factors.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. I mean, yeah, what is a community? I feel like when I listen to different scholars talk, they're always like, oh, there's no agreement on a definition. And I mean, to me, when I think about even my own personal communities in my life, I'm like, what makes me feel as though I'm in community with this group? And to me, it feels like a band of travelers who are on this journey for the long haul, and they see you through the ups and the downs. Like, that to me is community from a personal perspective. In the workplace, maybe that's a little bit different, but I think what I'm getting at is the commitment piece makes for a community, because when there's so much transience, it can be hard to get vulnerability. I'm thinking of Brene Brown
Oh,
and how
yeah, she's great, isn't she? Yeah.
yes, and like I've seen it where when people start, I mean, we hear this, but when people start opening up and being vulnerable with one another, that's just immediate signal like trust is there. And I think there's a book called The Speed of Trust, where a group only moves at the speed of trust. And so I think that's another element to what a community is. Again, it kind of feels like defining knowledge. It's a slippery concept. And even after years of trying to look at what is a good definition, I still don't have one. I more have stories and elements. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that I like that, and I think you're right. I think we're all looking for this one definition of like, right, that's it, and nothing else. Like that's the one thing. But I've noticed with the different with the different organisations I've worked with, the different sizes, the different disciplines, and then within that, all of the different people. I feel like it's what's the phrase, like horses for courses. What suits one
Mm,
group of people is maybe not the same as another. So I mean, I fully agree with you. I think the whole trust, the speed of trust, that's such a great concept. I think that is at the foundation of everything. And then how people spin up commitment and collaborating together seems to look different depending on the purpose, the group of people, this, that, and the other.
yeah.
Because I notice some people would prefer to be in like a virtual community. Some people would prefer to have a physical, community where they meet. Some
Hmm.
people like to work on stuff. Some people like to just, share cat pictures because actually it's just a moral support community at the end of the
Yep.
day. So yeah, I think the maybe instead of definitions, maybe we need to look at intent. I think there's a common intent to community, but then how it spins up and how it's
Mm.
defined is, as unique as every organization maybe.
Okay, I love that. I want to pick up the word intent because I'm thinking about linking that to, and you've said it before in this conversation, but purpose. Like, and that's what I find is one of the biggest pitfalls or traps that I notice in people that have communities or started communities and they're struggling is they can't articulate their why. And that this came from, I don't know if, are you familiar with Priya Parker?
No, I'm not. No.
She wrote a book called The Art of Gathering, and
Oh,
she
yes,
is
yes, I do know that. Yes, it was on my list for
okay.
reading. Yes.
Yeah, and starting with why, a lot of folks I think start with form and then they're struggling, as opposed to starting with why and then it becomes very clear what the format is. And I think sometimes we start with we need a community, but then if you started with a why responding to a particular problem, you might find out you don't even need a community. Like that's not the actual KM tool
Yeah.
to draw
Yeah,
on.
you're right, and I think there's the right tool at the right time, isn't there? And let's face it, we don't have the energy all the time to be, barking up the wrong tree with these KM tools. It's got to be the right thing for a whole bunch of practical and business reasons, I suppose. And yeah, I like where you're going with this, Sierra. I think understanding the purpose, taking the time and the honesty and the courage to really look at what that purpose is, and go forward with the right tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think, like, to your point about, like, how does that community get commitment? And I think if people aren't clear on the why is what is inspiring for people, I think, to move towards. I mean, we've
hmm
chatted about Simon Sinek before, start with why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I know he gets a bit
yeah.
of a hard time on LinkedIn where people are debating if you should start with the why, the what, the how, the when, the whatever. And it's like, come on,
Yeah.
I do think it's a good place to start. At least it challenges your thought. Like, you might not go
Yeah.
ahead with, I don't know, whatever falls out of your brain or your conversations from start with why, but I always feel like it's slightly, um, sort of jigs you out of your own ways of thinking a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll dive into a whole other episode on
Oh, yeah,
why
do a
and
whole one
what
on
and
that.
how.
And how and
But
what and when, yeah. I
yeah.
know what you mean. Just there's a thought bubbling about what you're saying there, and I remember I made the schoolgirl error with communities of going, oh, well, we'll
Mm,
put all of the mechanical engineers together, or we'll put the marketing people together. And it was very role based. And then wondering why maybe, oh, that's maybe not quite the right way. And then I had an absolute great part of my career working with Daniel Ranter in GE. And I remember he said one thing which completely flicked a switch in my brain around communities is that we were building knowledge networks at the time across GE and different
okay.
sort of spanning different businesses, and it was all around that it should be revolving around a problem or a challenge. And when we framed it like that, you ended up getting different roles, different businesses, different domain expertise, and then
Mm-hmm.
actually it was the problem, it was the challenge that sort of binded everyone together, and everybody could kind of put the skin in the game because that was the problem that connected them all. And there's another book that I always think about with communities, and I can't remember the fella's name, but it's called The Business of Belonging. Somebody Spinks, and I've read it cover to cover, and it was more about like brand communities and sort of external communities. But there's a great bit in there which sort of shows, like if you're a sports fan, like a favourite football team,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have different levels of buying into it with, oh, I like the team, I'm going to watch the game, I'm going to go to the game, now I'm going to buy the t-shirt, and I'm going to wear this t-shirt every day for the rest of my life because this is me and this is what defines me. So I feel like and you were touching on this before about, I think it was commitment, no, in kind of personal communities, I think we have that vulnerability, that commitment. And I don't think that looks the same in an organizational setting because,
No.
as much as we can make it psychologically safe and all of the rest of it, I think at the end of the day, it's a job and you do have a barrier of how you commit to that. But what I think is the word, the linchpin, the hook in an organization is the shared problem, which I think manifests the shared purpose. Even if it is, I'm going to join this community, so at least I have an easier day at work and go home at the end of the day and sleep well with money in my pocket and food on the table. There's a lot driving the purpose in a business like that. So yeah, sorry, I'm off on a ramble. I had too much sugar beforehand, so.
I know. I love this because this to me is a different dimension of humans in the loop that you're bringing up. Usually when I hear that term, it's in reference to being in the age of AI, keeping humans in the loop. But I think another way of what I'm hearing you say is, okay, what is the shared challenge that people are facing? That's that human-centered approach, that design thinking approach, keeping that human in the loop in your mind as the KM person and thinking, oh, as opposed to centering the community aspect, which is maybe my personal goal, like, was there a challenge and what in my KM backpack can I bring up and like, put
Yeah.
together for them? And they're like, wow, this is life changing. This has reduced the rate of human error, or this has brought me like that phone a friend when I don't know what to do and they have this expertise.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I was thinking,
yeah,
when we talked about this whole humans in the loop, and everything that comes up for me in KM at the moment is almost caveated with is this still relevant now in the world that we're living in and all of that? And I'm definitely from the camp that, knowledge is the preserve of people. It's in our heads, in our groups, and, all the great stuff that Dave Snowden talks about it being, in distributed consciousness and all of this great stuff,
yeah.
which I still need to really look into. That's next on the list. But, and I thought to myself, well, is all that still the case? Are humans still the
Mm,
center of knowledge management these days? And actually, I think it's more so. And I think about what, sorry, I'm doing a whole load of name dropping here, but it's just like coming
go
to
for
mind.
it.
It's
Go
like when
for it.
Stephanie Bonds talks about, helping the humans. It's almost like, yes, pet, like very much helping the humans. And I think, boy, do we need it now. And actually, who helps the humans? And I think it's us. I think it's us helping each other. I think we've got. It's very difficult to understand the world these days. I've stopped watching the
Mm,
news. I've stopped getting, to be quite honest, my head can't cope with it. But I think what's really helping me understand the world better is that I understand myself a lot better. And I think when we
mm,
understand ourselves and we understand each other and then we come together, I think it's going to help us make sense of all of the crazy stuff that goes on in and outside organizations. Um, so yeah, I mean, I suppose to weave it back to community, you know, I, I think it's probably more relevant than what it ever has been. I can't remember if it was
yeah.
before we pressed record or at the start of this when we were saying about the SIKM community. When you need an answer, you can get an answer. It's this whole like that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you phone a friend and you've already got one to ring. Well, we've got a whole entire international global community to call upon. Who you're going to call, all the
Yes.
gamers. So
100%. I love
yeah,
that.
so I think it's probably more relevant than ever when we think about communities, but I think we need to really pull our socks up as KMers to be, designing and architecting and putting communities in a lot better. And I'm saying a lot better, that's a bit of a sweeping statement, but I think working with all of the nuances and pitfalls of organizations and human psychology and all of that sort of stuff to help people come together in the way that they need to come together rather than what the textbook said 25 years ago as to
Mm,
how we need to bring people together. But I think that creates a whole new skill set that we need to build. I'm a big advocate now for helping KMers develop more business acumen and more psychology acumen to get these things going. So yeah.
yes, the neuroscience psychology aspect to it, I think is super important. Like, I was chatting with um a friend the other day in KM about um I can't remember the name of the tool, but it's kind of like similar to a disc profile or understanding, like, are the folks that I'm presenting to, are they more results driven? Are they more around innovation and they're willing to like wait for results because I understand that it's slow. And when you understand that, it really helps you tailor your messaging. I mean, this could get all into a conversation about how marketing can help KM,
Yeah.
but I'm I'm thinking our next, speaking of humans and more humans and questions, maybe we can get to our Q&R round.
Oh yeah, I love the. Just before we go on, like, please will you just define what Q&R is, because you totally blew me away with that the other day.
Oh, yes.
I love
Yes. Good
it.
reminder. Okay. So I'm of the belief that typically we hear about questions and answers, But with these kinds of questions, they're complex, and I don't think there is a single silver bullet answer solution, but there are responses. So what we're sharing here in this segment, where we've canvassed different KMers as well as just our own friends who know nothing about KM, is that I'm not coming to you and pretending this is the full baked answer. This is just a response, and hopefully it'll help you take your next step.
Exactly. And I'm also so pleased you said that, because I think, being on this like small stage that we're creating, I think, we don't have the answers. And I particularly would love, from anybody who's listening to this, obviously challenge what we're saying, but, appreciate that this is a response. This is to really spark, your thoughts, and I'd particularly love to hear anybody's responses to what we've been talking about, because, it really helps us to learn as well, doesn't it? So yeah, Q&R.
Yes. Q&R. All right. So we are going to share. I made a post on the SIKM community and asked for people's to submit their questions. And so Janine and I are just going to go through, just fiddling with the technology
Excellent.
here. 1 second.
Yeah, and just while you're doing that, I mean, I was thinking about this when I was riding the horse this morning. I was thinking, I think the SIKM group is a really good place for, to field questions. And I think also, you could contact us via LinkedIn or, post somewhere. I suppose just reach out to us if you've got questions that you want us to try and mull over in public.
Yes. Yes, this is
In
not
our
the only
rambles.
forum you can submit. That's a good point. Yeah. Are you seeing my screen, Janine?
I am,
A bit?
yes.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So our first question asker is Amy Carlton. Thank you, Amy. I met Amy. I think we both met Amy at Knowledge
We
Summit
did,
Dublin.
yes. Yeah.
Yes, she is amazing. I love her energy. She's asking, okay, a topic episode I would love to see is getting the basics right. Practical KM tips when people ask for guidance on starting out or refreshing their KM journey. Sometimes I find as KM practitioners, we can be guilty of getting quite detailed, speaking a KM language to the business who have no clue what KM even is. Maybe the most powerful KM move is simply making it easier for someone to begin, meeting the business where they were at. Okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts,
Yeah.
Janine?
For a million thoughts on that. Yeah. So, well, again, going back to what I said before about, things still being relevant, it makes me wonder, are the basics that we used to think in KM, are they still the basics right now? So I know, have the basics evolved or changed? Because, Amy's right. I think, we went off, let's make it more personal. Me, I've done it. I've bored people to tears with knowledge management. I mean, I've seen those glazed eyes more than I care to admit. I've took myself home and looked in the mirror and said, Janine, you're not going to talk like that again. And what did I do the next day? I did it again, and I did it a bit louder. So I get it, because, I think it's because we're so, it's almost like once you know, you can't unknow knowledge management. And then you start using the language, because let's face it, I don't think we have, it's not like usual language. Do you know what I mean? Like this sort of topic. So yeah, I think the whole communication element is a massive big deal. And I've talked about this a few times. So as you know, like I was employed and then I decided to go solo and start my own company. That's not a shameless promotion. There is some context to this.
Novolution, I will promote. Yep, check me out online, Novolution. Yes. Okay, continue.
But what I think was the massive thing, I mean, I had a horrible, horrible day when I thought, do I even know what knowledge management is? Because now I've got to go out and I've got to got to try and hook these business leaders into this and make them fall in love with it so I can feed my dogs at the end of the day, and pay the bills.
Yeah.
And every line of questioning or conversation or whatever, it just wasn't sticking. It wasn't flying. And then I think going back to what we talked about before about the start with why and what and when and how, I was always
Yeah.
going in with this is knowledge management and isn't knowledge sharing so great for your business, blah, blah, blah. And until I actually just put all of that at the back of my mind and I said, right, I'm going to try and talk today without even saying knowledge management. How am I going to do that? And what Amy says there about meeting the business where they're at, I think that is such a key point. When forget you even know about knowledge management. Don't even bother with it. Was it David Griffith said this to me? You fall in love with their problems. So you find out what the business's pain is. What, if you're talking to a leader, what's keeping them up at night, and you listen to that. That gives you all of the intel for you to then, in Terminator style, mull it over in your mind, come up with all of the solutions, and then out comes the KM response that matches what the business needs. So you're speaking into their listening. So when I'm talking about getting the basics right, I think a massive basics that we don't do is how to do the business talk, how to talk on that level. I don't think you can go in with just rabbiting on about the best KM tools and systems that you found. It just doesn't fly. So yeah, that was kind of my big nebulous thought about that. And I think, yes, speaking the KM language, challenge yourselves, try and talk about this without talk. Was it the first rule of Fight Club? Don't talk about Fight Club. I think we need to talk.
Yes.
I am pulling out all the references today, but that's the way I think. Just don't talk about knowledge management. Just say anything you can other than that.
It's so hard. It's so hard. I know.
It's really hard.
Because we love this stuff. That's why we need it, like Knowledge Summit Dublin, another plug here. But, that's where you can just say all the KM language and talk to your people. And then talk about how we don't use that KM language when we go to the business world.
Yeah.
And learn.
It's not about, avoiding it for avoiding its sake. I think it's about reframing it. Like, just come at it from the there's another phrase that kept me on track with my business is coming from a position of service rather than authority. So I find that when we talk about knowledge management, we're coming from a position of authority. I don't mean like looking down on people. I mean, this sort of scholarly academic, theoretical, practical thing about knowledge management. But I think when you flip that to coming from a position of service, how am I going to help you win more customers? How am I going to help you deliver your projects faster or on time? And then kind of colour it with the whole, and I just so happen to be doing it through knowledge management, and I'm going to pull in these basic tools to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've nailed it, Janine. You lead with what is the problem? Like what is keeping you up at night kind of thing. No, I think that's really good.
I mean, Sarah, I know when we were just talking before, weren't we, about that conversation we had over a sandwich in First Knowledge Summit Dublin, and you were very much sort of dipping your toes in the water of your KM journey, because you had that realization, hadn't you, that everything that I'm doing here, all that happens to be knowledge management, and then going into it. What would you say then? How would you define the basics? Or even if it's from that practical tool point, what does the basics look like for you?
Well, it's funny because I started in knowledge mobilization at the beginning of my journey. Yeah. And so I only happened across the term knowledge management. And when I did, I was like, okay, how is this same and different? Because knowledge mobilization has its roots in academia, in universities, where, we all know, we've read academic articles. They're quite difficult to understand, in just a regular, but there's so much, golden nuggets in those articles that could make a huge difference in the world. And so my ethos on knowledge management or knowledge mobilization came from a guy, David Phipps. He's incredible. He really taught me two things that have stuck with me. He said, we don't just do knowledge mobilization for knowledge mobilization's sake. It's about impact. The second thing is you can't have impact with what you know without relationships. And so to me, the basics were those two things of just impact and relationships. And coming from a public sector background, the challenges that I was often thinking about is these big wicked issues that we look at in the world and see, from like mis and disinformation and declining trust in democratic institutions, and a global health crisis. Like, so how do you have impact on those issues? And with knowledge, with what we know, with what's buried in academic journals, how do you get that out and bring it into practice? And so that was what was always front of mind for me at the beginning, is impact and relationships. And then how do you actually build those relationships of the knowledge sharing kind? And so one principle that I was always bringing to mind was the concept of ripples, because to me, impact is really related to the idea of ripples. I mean, when we hear that, I think most people get in their mind that image of a rock in water and then the ripples going out. But how do we, at the beginning of when we want to start a knowledge process, think about how do I set conditions for those ripples to happen? And so some of the basic questions I ask myself, or I ask a client, is this initiative that you're starting, like, who else might it affect in the ecosystem? Who else is already doing this? So you're not starting from ground zero. You're actually starting from where people have gotten to. Um, and by building those relationships from the beginning, we know ripples happen through connections, through a network. So if you're starting to already build that network at the very beginning, then you set yourself up for when that initiative is in its fullest form to really snowball, because people have been a part of it. They know about it. They're contributing what they know. There's this reciprocity happening. Um, and then the other basic that I will talk about briefly is just curiosity. I find questions have been questions are doorways to action. Um, and they will bring you to people who will change your life. I mean, even with like my mentor, David Phipps, that I was talking about, like, it started with me sending an email to him with a question of, can you explain this thing called knowledge mobilization? And then him responding, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Or like sending a question to Barry and being like, hey, can you tell me more about this conference? And like, and how that brought me to Dublin. And then now here I am with a podcast. Like, questions are crazy. Like, they are the difference that makes a difference, I think.
Yeah, and I think on that point with the questions, I mean, yeah, this past week I've been asked a lot of questions, and I love
Oh,
that because it helps you really access your own experience. And it's that whole thing, in Dave Snowden's principles, you don't know, what you know. And I think these sort of questions help bring that out. And just with the response that you've given there to what the basics are, you mentioned like impact and relationships and curiosity. And then I mentioned about the sort of the business connection and things like that.
mm,
I'm wondering, you know, it- when I first started my journey, if I was talking about the basics, I probably would have, maybe mentioned, um, the whole like data, information, knowledge triangle, and how we should throw that out the window.
yeah.
And these, not it was a right information, right time, right purpose. I think that one still stands. But
Mm,
I think it just, maybe this is our bias, Sierra, though, because we are very people focused with the whole knowledge management thing.
yeah.
Even when you think the title of the podcast. So I'm always aware of my bias, that I do lean towards the people side of things.
Mm-hmm.
However, I, like I say, I think the basics have changed. It isn't about this whole came from the point of the falling out of the information management
Yeah.
side. I think it's the came falling out of the, like you say, the relationships, the impact that it gets. So apologies to anybody who's listening who thought we were going to talk about like, A plus B equals C and all of the tools out
Yeah.
there. But like I say, maybe it's our bias, but I'd put my money on the basics have changed now, and I think maybe we have to put
Mm-hmm.
our big girl pants on and accept that times are different now.
Yep. Yes, 100% agree with everything you just said. I'm curious. Yeah, because you often hear it starting with uh, DIKW and, different models that have gotten a lot of flack and what is tacit versus explicit. But I think to me, the simple rule I carry in my brain, and this comes from human systems dynamics, which is grounded in complexity, is keep it like, is it true and useful? That's what I always ask myself for the concept. Like, it might be true. It might be true that these models are problematic for different reasons. But what is actually useful to me in this moment? And is it also true? So, to me, what was useful in getting started and also true was this paradigm of impact and relationships, because that really, being in a public sector sphere, it's all about service to Canadians in my case. And the relationships piece, like, I wasn't getting anywhere by sitting at my desk banging my head against like a academic paywall. Like, I'm like, just get out and talk to the people that are writing about this. Send them a message on LinkedIn. And it made it so much more enriching too. But like, I am a hardcore extrovert, so I get, again, my bias to the go talk to everybody thing. But yeah. So
No, I think that's interesting what you say, because I think there's the job to be done with knowledge management, and then you've got the personalities doing it. So I've
yeah.
already alluded there to, our bias towards people and that, and ask me to do anything with data and I'll have to go and, I don't know, have a word with myself in the toilet beforehand. Some things just aren't necessarily my forte. However, I've learned to understand that and know how it reflects the practice that I then deliver. And I think knowing your own gaps. And I think like what you've said there about the impact in relationships and the stuff that we've talked about, I think I'll probably just pose a bit of a rhetorical question that, is that the same the world over, or does it depend on what organisation you're working with? So you were talking about the public service. If I think about, I know an oil and gas company, does that basic still apply in both areas?
Yeah.
Is it geographically still applicable? Depend on the people who you work with, and then also then you've got the personalities delivering the knowledge management, and does that have an impact? So that's probably something for me to either think about when I'm in the shower tonight or when I'm falling off to sleep and the brain fires up again. So
those thoughts that wake you up at 2 a.m. about
maybe
what
that's
paradigm of chaos.
Yeah, we could add that into this podcast, couldn't we? Like, the thoughts for this evening's shower. Debate. Answers on a postcard.
People in our lives are like, turn it off. You're getting very boring now. Yes. Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good segue into. So I know we had more questions there, but I think we had such a rich conversation. So Mark Britz, you are on our list for the next podcast. We'll get to your question, as well as from our friends who know nothing about KM that we have pulled, but we'll bring that in next session, because I think we had a really good conversation about Amy. So thank you, Amy.
Yep, thanks, Amy.
You clearly be careful what you ask about. You might get us going on for 15 minutes. But anyways,
good job you can edit this, Sierra.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the section that I've been looking forward to the most, the crack. You can tell we're already having a lot of laughs. What has been the crack for you lately, Janine? What is keeping you human and happy and good times?
Yeah, well, it was funny when you saying about the crack, because we've definitely come across that phrase from our shenanigans with the Irish crew, and as you know, I'm in northeast England, and we have the crack as well. Hey, what's the crack? It just is what it is. But yeah, I think that so the crack for me has been very much around self-care, shall we say. So as you know, I ended up putting myself in hospital with blinding headaches due to stress. I'm all right, everybody. It's official. I do actually have
People
a brain.
Like, how is this a good time?
I know, how is it? Yeah, stick with it, people. I'm going on a journey. But in one sense, it was great, because I found out through all of like different tests and whatever, I've got a clean bill of health. I'm all right. I just need to chill the hell out. And
You need to calm down, Janine.
I need to calm down. Yeah, drink less coffee, eat less sugar, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So what I did was, in my sort of extreme, I need to relax at a molecular level. I ended up, as some of you might know, I'm very much into heavy metal and rock music. So I decided to follow one of my favorite bands around on 3 back-to-back gigs and
It's
stand
amazing.
next to the speakers so that I got the full force of the music coursing through my body. It was like, when you go swimming and you jump in the deep end and suddenly you're surrounded by all of this water. Well, I was surrounded by all of this blindingly loud music vibrating me at a molecular level, and I was super chilled out. So anyway, that's been my crack. I recommend standing next to speakers if you really need an extreme chill out.
If you have a head injury.
Yeah, if you've got
Brought
a head
to you by
injury, just
Dr.
go.
Weightman.
Yeah, you can obviously
Yeah.
see it's made a difference. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing,
Yeah.
Janine. I can just picture it. I need to see you in your element, like rocking out. Like I feel like this is definitely in our future, in our next in-person meetup.
Definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
no medicinal purposes. And Sierra, what's been your crack this week?
Well, it's funny because we were chatting about this before, but because I too had a head injury in September, and I'm not going to tell you how that happened.
Yeah.
It's not a cool story at all.
Mhm.
We'll go with I was playing ice hockey. I am Canadian, so I'll use that as my cover story. Yeah, but what's interesting is like I was going to a physio and getting my protocol for how to take care of this thing, and the thing she suggested was like very high intensity cardio, which was shocking because the typical thing that I've seen is you're told to lay in a dark room. So thank goodness, you know what? This is a shout out to knowledge management, whether people know it or not. Increased studies have made their way to bedside and to practice and make the lives of people who are experiencing concussions so much better. And so I started to hit up the gym on the elliptical. I haven't done cardio in years because I've been recovering from back injury and I didn't think I could do it. Okay, Janine, I have discovered I freaking love the elliptical to the point where I have had on more than one occasion, some people come up to me and say, I'm sorry, but I just have to say, like, I've never seen anybody push that thing so hard. And I'm like, I'm recovering from a brain injury. This is what it looks like. I'm just
amazing.
like sweat pouring. And I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. Okay, so the new album came out. So I am like cranking Fate of Ophelia. I know I'm kind of basic that way, but so I've just been having the time of my life on the elliptical, and my head has recovered in like record time. It's amazing. So I do believe this is, thank God for science and
Yeah,
knowledge management.
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, kind of bringing it back to what we've been talking about. I mean, who would have thunk it that like these sort of completely off the wall practices with head injuries to make you feel better? I mean, we have to warn Barry, don't worry about the summit. It might be a little bit like crazy this year if he's got like 2 members of his team recovered from head injuries, organise and implement world-class summit. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to have our
Look
like
at us.
little rock room music with ellipticals in the sensory room so that we can just build up the energy. Yeah,
Yep.
I love it.
This is our crack. Yeah.
This is our crack, and that's the crack, everyone.
Yes, that is the
Tune in for
crack.
more top tips.
Yep. Totally. And yes, and feel free to comment in the comment section what your crack has been lately, because we'd love to know.
Yeah,
and maybe it will always come back to knowledge management.
maybe, yeah.
here.
Even if it is a tenuous link.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Bit of a reach. Oh, all right. Well, thank you, Janine. That was so much fun. I had an
Thank
awesome
you,
time.
Sierra. I just think that, yeah, it's great. It's been great meeting you from day one, and I'm really excited to be having these chats and exploring, the subject that we love so much. So, yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I will say, like, it's crazy. Like, we met, was it 2023 was the first?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 2024. Yeah. So from Knowledge Summit Dublin, like, talk about ripples, the snowball effect of that. Here we are starting a podcast and having maybe one too many laughs, but we should start
It
recording our
is
late night
Saturday
like
afternoon.
meeting calls. Those would
Oh,
be
yeah,
fun.
well, I've got a new dressing gown now, so I don't look quite so raggedy,
Okay.
so
Up the
that's
fashion ante.
yeah, I'm so pleased you were okay with that, because obviously the time zone differences, and
Yeah.
I'm getting ready for bed and you're firing up for the day, so yeah.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, and like talking about Knowledge Summit Dublin, I mean, I know it's only October, but June 29th and 30th is going to come faster than we know it. And I know we both are super excited. So, if you're tuning in, leave a comment, let us know if you're coming, and we'd love to meet you in person in June. All right, Janine, any parting words?
Oh, just have a great day, whatever you're doing, everyone, life's for living. Let's do this.